why don't we move on to our last question here? So this one says, how do I stop using credit cards and when could I reintroduce them? I'm working through some credit card debt now, but keep finding myself going deeper and deeper into debt. How did you go about not using your cards? And when did you decide it was time to reintroduce them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And kind of like we talked about earlier, like if you're working towards paying off some credit card debt, like I think both of us are in agreement that like the best thing you can do is to just cut the credit cards out of your life completely, at least for now, right? But I will say, like, I think a lot of people can be stuck in this hard place where the reason they're using credit cards, the reason they're putting their monthly expenses on is because their income doesn't cover all of their monthly expenses, and so they need the credit card, or at least need access to it to be able to get through the month. And like honestly, like there's not really like a magic trick here of how to get past that. Like the best focus of your attention and your effort is going to be increasing your income, at least to a point where you can cover all of your expenses with your monthly take home pay. And once you get to that point, then, obviously you can literally afford to not use the credit cards anymore. But, assuming you're at a place where your income can cover your expenses, you just find yourself consistently putting those expenses on a credit card and the debt keeps piling up. I mean, honestly, what I would say is you got to just remove them from your life. Yeah. And that's more than just taking them out of your wallet. But a lot of things that people forget is like, it could be linked to your Starbucks app. It can be linked to your Amazon, or your subscriptions can be on those credit cards. Like there is a bit of work that you have to do to like fully remove them from your life. And, I don't think that you should necessarily like close out those accounts. Although for some people that's what they're going to have to do, right? Like that would be an easier way to kind of cut yourself off from them. But if you can put like the right habits in place, I would say, get those cards out of your life. You can even cut them up. It's just as easy to order a new one, and make sure to remove them from all of your digital wallets. That's probably where I would start to stop using them. And then you're going to have to see that money coming out of your account. I think that's kind of one of the things that can contribute to not spending as much. Cause I think when we see our account balance go down, like that hurts a little bit more than just swiping a credit card, Yeah.
And I think, for people who are looking to like move away from this credit card, cycle that you're in. Mm-hmm. I also think, like we talked about it, not many people are actually budgeting and knowing what they're putting on their credit cards. So I think that's a really good place to start too. Like, start with your income at the top and see, can you actually afford your life without their credit cards? You probably can. Are you going to be able to go out to eat as much or buy miscellaneous things here and there? No, probably not. But if you're only focusing on the essentials, you could probably make that shift a little bit easier for yourself. So I think that's a really good place to start too, to eventually switch out of this. Now, when do you reintroduce a credit card? And I love this question because, as we mentioned earlier, it's important to know how to use a credit card appropriately before you reintroduce them back into your life, or you're just going to start the cycle all over again. And I've seen people do that time and time again. And also, like you mentioned about the 0% transfer cards, credit card companies know that you're not going to pay that off because this is just what you do. You max out a credit card at 29% interest and then you move it over to 0%. And the same thing's going to continue to happen because now that other card is free, right? Mm-hmm. So, when to reintroduce them, whenever you're in a good cycle of paying all of your expenses with your debit card. So you've cut your credit cards out and now you're using your debit card and you're following your budget. And you're saying, okay, this month I have $200 to spend on eating out and it's the middle of the month and I've spent $100. Okay, I have $100 left to go. And then I know that this money is going to be on my bank card because this is the money coming out of my paycheck that's coming into my account. Once you have that down and you're good at just using the money that you have in your account, then you can just kind of swap out the cards and use your credit card for those things and then just pay it off. Because all you're doing is just pretending that credit card is your debit card to use it as, your form of payment, that you're just going to take your money out of your bank account and then pay your credit card company. So that's a good place to do it. But only when that happens would I suggest reintroducing them.
Yeah, no, that everything you said, like I completely agree with it. And, I think when you start to reintroduce it, like just start small, like I think you can just get into a really good habit of, can I put one category of expenses here? And I think the easiest one would be, can I just put my gas on here, right? Yep. Like every time I go and fill up my tank, I'll just use the credit card. And then like as an added step, like if you are really nervous about falling back into credit card debt, pay it off right away. Like you don't have to worry about optimizing your usage to get the best credit score. That's going to happen over time, but put the expense on it. And then when you get home, just pay it off from your bank account. And that I think is going to help you build up the habit of, or at least the understanding that when I put an expense on this card, it's real cash that I'm spending and I have to pull that from my bank account. So there's not like a double amount of cash that I have access to. Like it's only what's in my bank account. But you know, you said this earlier and I completely agree with it. And I think people could see this as like a controversial take and it's a hill I'm willing to die on a little bit. But like when most people say that like they need a credit card to be able to afford life or things are just too expensive for them, like granted, there are people in really tough situations who've just lost their job or whatever, right? I think for the vast majority of people, though, they can afford their life if they were to cut down to what they only needed. Yeah. And now a lot of people might say like, that's a terrible way to live. Like we live in a first world country. We shouldn't be living like this. Should or shouldn't, you know, like we're not entitled to anything. And I think at the end of the day, most people could afford their lifestyle, their life at least, with the money that they're bringing in. And where they're going wrong, where they're feeling the pain of rising costs of maybe an income that's not so great or an income that hasn't kept pace with inflation, where they're feeling that pain is all the unnecessary spending, all the wants, all the dining out, the entertainment, the random DoorDashes or coffee trips, right? Like all those little expenses, like those are what add up to tens of thousands of dollars a year. And I think I said this in the last episode, but like the easiest way to waste $10,000 a year is to spend $27 a day. And if you just kind of think back, like when was the last time I went out for lunch or got a coffee or ordered DoorDash or went to Target and got some random thing, like $27 goes by so quick, especially at a place like Target or on Amazon where buying things are so quick, you know? I think most people could afford their life if they cut out what was, you know, kind of the BS spending. And then they wouldn't have to rely on going into debt just to live this life that they can't afford, to be honest, you know?
Yeah. And I think, like you said, that's a good approach to it. But, you know, once you get your credit cards paid off, you've freed up so much money too. You know, yeah, like you're done paying your payments every month. And I know so many people that try to pay like $1,000 a month toward their card with the money in their bank account, but then they don't have money to live. So then they're putting that money back on. Like they're paying off the card just to put more money on the card, if that makes sense. So once you get out of that cycle and you stop putting all of this money on the card and you get them paid off, then you actually have money. And that's what I figured out. Yeah, I had to take some sacrifices when I was paying off my debt, but after it was all paid off, I was like, oh, my money is mine now. Like it's not going towards this debt every single month. And that is the magic right there. But there is some sacrifice in there during the time when you're going to have to pay it off until it's paid off. And then you can actually use that money. So I think that's where people get, tripped up as well, as how do I get out of that cycle of, paying off my card with the money in my account only to put more money on the card because I need to live, you know?
Yeah. And, I think you said this in a previous episode, but so many people look at, can they afford the monthly payment, not can they afford the thing? And I think especially with things like Afterpay or buy now, pay later, like, the cost of something that you want, maybe like a new Mac or what, a new computer or a new, like a device or something, like the cost can be so high up front, but you see this attractive monthly payment. Like, hey, if I just make, a $99 payment for the next 12 months, I'll have just paid for it in full. Right. Not looking at purchases or expenses as can I afford the monthly payment, but instead, can I afford to actually purchase this thing? I think that's such a huge step. But yeah, that's kind of the end of my rant. So Lauren, do you have anything else to add to this?
No, I don't think so. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.